Welcome to the Rewire Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Stewman, and I'm here to rewire your mind for success. We're glad that you're here.
You know, recently I threw our annual Million Dollar Mastermind event, and at these events we have over 1,000 people so far. It's for the last 4 years, so that's been nice. And 2020 we had over 1,000 people online. We didn't get to do it in person, but 2021 we had 1,000, 2019 we had 1,000, 22 we had 1,800, 23 we had 1,300. So, you know, it's been a decent size event for a few years now. I've had some amazing keynote speakers. And in this particular event in MDM 2023, Million Dollar Mastermind this year, I had Mike Rowe as the final speaker on the final day. And Mike Rowe, in my opinion, is one of the most prolific storytellers. If you've never listened to any of his books or his podcast or watched his TV show, you're really doing yourself a disservice, because he can teach you how to write, speak better, tell stories. And so that's what I brought him in for, is like, yeah, I'm going to do an interview, but I want to dissect how he tells these stories. Well, so we're up there on stage and he's telling me this story about these rats, this experiment. And it was a scientist did an experiment where they took these rats and they put them in a bucket full of water. And on average, about 14 minutes into it, the rats would give up hope and die and drown. So rats tread water trying to stay alive. 14 minutes go by, they die. So after 14 minutes becomes kind of the norm, they start picking them up at 13 and a half minutes. They dust them off, give them a piece of cheese, give them a little bit of milk, make them feel good, then throw their ass right back in the bucket. He goes around the room and he says, how many hours do you think that they swam? People say, I don't know, an hour. Maybe they stayed in 30 minutes. They stayed in 60 hours, y'all. That's from 15 minutes to 2.5 days. Just to put that in perspective. What was the ingredient that made these rats? Now, this is me talking, not Mike. What is the ingredient that made those rats swim for 60 hours when originally they thought they could only swim for 14? Well, so the other day, I had to get an MRI. I hate MRIs. I don't know why. Well, first of all, anything medical sucks, but I've had this back problem, so they're looking into it. And the last time I had to have an MRI, and I broke my neck in 2 places in my arm. So they put me in this machine, in a cast, in a neck brace, and all this machinery. And I just felt like I couldn't breathe in there. And I went six times, 6 fucking times to the place and walked out all 6 times without an MRI. And so when I showed up this week to go get this MRI, it had been a few years since I got there, but they knew me and immediately started laughing. Not my finest moment, y'all, you know. But they slid me into this machine. And he said, it's going to take about 45 minutes. And I'm like, okay, just don't open your eyes. You can breathe just fine. Just don't open your eyes. Don't open your fucking eyes, Ryan. You can breathe just fine. My heart was just racing, y'all, for no reason. There's nothing to be scared of. There's nothing to worry about. I wasn't even all the way in this thing, man. I'm only like halfway in. They're just looking at my back, you know. I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, you know, I don't know how long it's been. But I'm like, man, I got this ball in my hand, and if I squeeze this ball, they'll come in and they'll pull me out. And he says, we won't have to do the whole thing over. We may just have to do a couple minutes. So if you need a break, you know, this time, let's just get it done, Mr. Stewman. You know, he's cheering me on. Right as I'm about to squeeze the ball in the headphones that they have you. First of all, I guess that thing's so loud. They have me put on like shit you put in your ears when you shoot guns, like the little earplugs, and then headphones on top of that. And he comes through the headphones and he says, okay, man, you're doing a great job. You got about 12 minutes left. And it was at that point where, like, man, I feel like I could have went another 30, 40. I was just about to squeeze that ball. But then what did he do? He came in and he gave me hope that there was an end in sight. You see, that's what those rats were missing. At 14 minutes, there was no end in sight, right? 14 minutes, like, fuck, I'm tired. It's over. But then when someone shows them that there's little hope, that there might be an alternative to their life, there's another end in sight, nothing changed within them. They weren't giving some sort of drug. They weren't shot up with testosterone. They weren't any of that stuff. What happened is all of a sudden their mind was altered, that there was a different ending than what they had suspected all along. We have that 60 hours in us, guys. A lot of y'all playing for 14 minutes right now, not realizing you got 60 hours inside of you. You live in a 14-minute life when you've got a 60-hour life that can provide it for you. You're just missing the hope element because you never had nobody like me in your life. You never had nobody to say, hey, man, I've been through that. You're about 12 minutes away from fucking the other side of this thing. Hey, man, I've been through that. Let me tell you what it's like on the other side of that struggle. Hey, I understand. I get it. I've experienced it myself. Let me hold your hand through it. See, when you got hope on that level, it changes for us, just like it changed the amount of time. But imagine, like you've been on a treadmill 14 minutes versus 60 hours. David Goggins, maybe it wasn't David, maybe it was Jocko that was famous for really starting this. Is a SEAL mindset. Is like when you think you've drained the whole tank, you've still got 40 or 60% left. When you think you have nothing left, you're completely out of energy, you can't go another mile, you've still got 40 to 60% left in the tank. The bitch voice, as Andy Frisella calls it, it kicks in way early because it's in protection mode. But here's what I want you to take from this episode. If you're living a life of 15 minutes, it's time that you instill some hope that there's 60 hours ahead of you. Rise above.